why, but it's been a very good year for fighting games. I just wanted to say that, and I have no idea why I did this, but then I looked at the cover of that and thought, oh, that's right. I've been playing a lot of Tekken 8 lately. Now that I've washed that stuff out of my hair, I think it's probably time to talk properly about the fact that I look like a human toilet brush when I don't have that stuff in my hair. Hi, I'm Manny, if you want to talk to me. I'm here to do my old man yells at cloud routine today, and I'm here to talk to you today about the things I think about, because there's plenty of other people on the internet doing the same thing, and it looks like fun. So today I'm taking up the subject of, obviously you could probably tell from the background that I'm into nerdy stuff, so nerds might be aware of a chap named Asmongold, and all of this controversy he seems to be courting about the place in regards to Kotaku and boycotting of certain LGBTQ consulting writers groups. And I'm not really here to talk to you about that shit today, the new Gamergate, whatever it is. That doesn't interest me. What does interest me is an age-old argument that has gone on the arse end of the Reddit forums and 4chan posts and whatever on the internet for time immemorial, is the sentiment of game journalists basically being pointless and stupid and saying and doing things that are terrible and not worth paying attention to because, we have YouTubers. But I hate to be the one to tell you, kid, but unfortunately, there hasn't always been a YouTube or YouTubers to go with it, especially ones who talk about video games, for instance, and that on average, gaming journals actually contribute a great deal to this hobby that you enjoy in the world of video games. So I'm here to ramble about that before everyone starts doing things like death threats to particular people on particular gaming journalism websites and saying that all journalists are a waste of flesh, yada yada yada. Let's go through some things in defense of games journalism and games journalists. So we're gonna get, oh my god, that's really warm. So yeah, I guess I get to look like a toilet brush for the rest of this, but you know what, I don't care. So firstly, let's talk about the old way of doing things. Before everything gave way to YouTube, Twitch, and other video streaming platforms, video gaming websites were actually the only places where you get videos about gaming. Places like IGN, GameTrailers.com, in the mid-2000s till like 2010 or whenever they had to shut down. They were the only places on the internet you could get video for new games and things like that. And yeah, that was kind of cool, but game video websites got much bigger, and then YouTube became the biggest thing on the internet besides, Facebook and, all the rest of the shit. Anyway, in the early days, that's where we got media from. Like, seeing a video of a new game like any more than once every 6 months to a year, or the things that came on the discs of the games you had to buy physically in a shop, you didn't get to see much material for new games. Certainly not things that you knew you were looking forward to. Like, everything was a surprise because we were basically, all of us were all floating on islands waiting for messages in a bottle to come our way when it came to video games. That's what life was like. Then 2000 rolls around, we get IGN, this, that, and the other thing, and a few other gaming websites, and more they start incorporating video into their websites. And we also got the early days of live streaming broadcasts with things like GameSpot's On the Spot. I was watching that in like 2007 and my parents fucking freaking out over the fact that we had absolutely no data cap within 2 days of it rolling over, and I was like, I have to see this live Fear match played on Xbox 360s in San Francisco, like right now. You wouldn't have a Twitch if people weren't trying to do these things and show that they were, things that people would want to watch all these years earlier. Like, people wouldn't have had the idea for streaming as a large scale social platform, or it might have taken more time to just appear if gaming journalists weren't doing those things before everyone else. Another generalized point I'd like to make about gaming journos and game journalism is that they tend to bleed into game development. How do you mean? I mean actual writers, game journos, end up working on some of the video games you love. So Hades is a really popular game, and the company that makes Hades and Pyre and what was the first one? Bastion. They've been making games for like 10, 12 years now. That was founded by Greg Kasavin. Greg Kasavin was one of the senior writers over at GameSpot during the mid-2000s. He left there to go and start doing writing jobs on certain video games. One of those was Spec Ops: The Line, which is, despite being a game you can't actually buy anywhere anymore, that's another fucking massive argument for another day. But it was a really well-written game. It's one of those things that people used to hold up to their parents like, look, Mum, it's adult, it's complex, it makes me feel like a terrible person. It makes me feel things, and it's a game about shooting people, and yeah, that was kind of new, and still kind of is. Not many games are all that affecting when it comes to their storytelling, at least in my experience. I might be a jaded asshole, but yeah, that was made by a journo. And now I know the shaved head lunatics who have tattoos that say all men are enemies on them, things like that, like the goblins that follow Asmongold on Reddit are, talking about at the moment. There are lunatics in games journalism. Don't get me wrong, it's a writing job. It attracts the attention of the bourgeois, middle-class people with far too much time in their hands to think about things that don't really matter, he says, staring off into the background at all of the purchases of things that he doesn't really have time to use. Oh God, I've spent way too much money on video games. But that being said, video games and video games journalists very much need each other. And like news stories, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that Western video game development, especially in America, especially in Hollywood, is closely connected to Hollywood media. Another individual who springs to mind as being very, very net positive for video games as something of worth is Alana Pierce. Despite being extremely photogenic, she's an Australian woman who worked for IGN and was the face of the Daily Fix for a while, and then she later explained that she didn't want to be typecast as a pretty girl being a talking head, and she's gone on to work for Sony Santa Monica and set up charities for disabled gamers, and she's like a humanitarian gamer. And she worked on God of War Ragnarok, I believe. Again, working on games that people like. So you might be noticing a pattern that I'm trying to get across here. A lot of really massive American video games are made in California, specifically in Los Angeles. Call of Duty is part of the Hollywood industrial complex. There's a lot of movement in between the movie industry and the video games industry. There's a lot of crossover. And Hollywood movies, Hollywood video games get a lot of creative and useful talent from media about video games, media staff, people who work in public relations to help market video games, often worked as journalists in video gaming. It's all one and the same, So when you say disgustingly, stupidly broad generalizations like, gaming journalists are a waste of time, no, who needs them? There's so many people who work as writers and reporters and marketers and things like that. People who work as part of the media apparatus for discussing and advertising video games are also, a lot of the time, people who end up working on them. And as you've probably all fucking noticed, it's really hard to be passionate about video game development these days. I think we've seen a record number of people get fired. But one thing when you see someone who's worked as a games journo and ends up making games that people like, they do it because they love games just like you. It might not be the same games. They might not be for the same reasons. They might not hold anything other than a love of gaming in themselves that would be similar to you. But I know you all care deeply about this shit because it's fun. And you can't go and make something as fun as video games and talking about them into a fucking war over the internet, asking for people's lives to be taken or trying to tell them that they're someone who doesn't deserve to exist, even though they might be insane. Some of them might be insane, I mean. You should hold back. Please hold back on saying something completely insane to an insane person who happens to be a video game journalist. And don't make generalizations about gaming journalism. It's helped you more than you realize. That's my ramble. Have a fun day.